Anybody here a fan of George Carlin? Yeah. Me too. He's not for the faint-hearted, but if you enjoy a good sardonic ripping of the silly things in life, George Carlin is a guy to watch. Well, in the midst of a lot of, in the words of Monty Python, silly things going on in the world, Gwen and I decided to watch a little bit of George Carlin last night, and it was a good reminder, especially when he began to make his understandable critiques of religion. The cynicism that he brings to the table of people who claim to have religion but don't live it out. That is where today's James reading is one of my favorites, and also one of the most uncomfortable, squirmy passages of Scripture. Because he reminds us that faith without works is dead. But what is faith? I know that sounds just like a pithy philosopher question to ask, but in all honesty, that was one of the key issues that consumed the mindset of the early Jesus movement. What does it mean to be in the family of God? What does it mean to have faith in God? Paul spends most of his authentic letters articulating the notion that it is through either faith in Jesus or the faithfulness of Jesus that non-Jews are brought into covenant relationship with the God of Israel. And that it isn't works that gets you in, it's belief that gets you in, or faith. What do you think? Is simply believing something sufficient for you to live into the fullness of God? I see you shaking your heads. Would someone who shook their head like to tell why they shook their heads? Stephanie?
You have to do something to love your neighbor as yourself.
You have to do something to love your neighbor as yourself. That's where a lot of times there's a phrase that gets, I think, misunderstood and misused a lot. And that is thoughts and prayers. Now, I think to offer thoughts and prayers to someone over whom whatever tragedy has happened to them, you have no control, is a holy and precious thing. So the phrase itself is a wonderful thing. Thoughts for those who don't really want to ascribe to religion. But the reality is offering up to God, asking that God take care of them and be with them in that. Now, if you are responsible for the tragedy that occurs to that person, are your thoughts and prayers adequate? No?
Well, if it's your fault, you gotta make amends.
If it's your fault, you have to make amends. You have to do something. You have to examine, how did my action cause this pain to other people? And that is something that every single one of us struggles with. Now, I catch myself sometimes wanting to wag my finger and yell at people for not doing their part. And oh God goes, hey Jeff, look, there's this big mirror right here. You should look at that before you look at anybody else's mistakes. It doesn't mean that I don't have the right to be upset about those things. And it doesn't mean that I shouldn't at times call people out for those things. But I darn well better be taking care of my own actions first. So, if belief is not sufficient, then what is the basis of our lives with God? Covenant. Oh, what?
I was going to say action.
Action, yes. Is a covenant an action? If you make vows, you're making a serious action. If you make vows, you're expected to live into them. I'm sure that anyone here who has any sort of mutual relationship with someone doesn't think, I can say those things and not have to live them out. That would not be something that would be a normal expectation. However, I also like the fact that James says, Judgment without mercy will be given no mercy, but mercy triumphs judgment. So much as there may be accountability and judgment that needs to happen, even if we break our covenants, which our story is one where we break covenant with God and God keeps with us, there is room for mistakes. There's room for faults. There's room for errors. And it's our responsibility to live into our faith so that we can build God's kingdom. Paul Tillich, is one of my favorites, said that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of belief is doubt. But belief actually is not faith. Faith is like the second trial in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. You remember that scene? Where he walks into this chasm, and only a leap from the lion's mouth will he prove his worth. Well, there's this chasm that goes into the center of the earth, and there's nothing there. Have you ever felt like that in life before? Did you leap out anyway? Did you step out? Did you find that invisible ledge? Because it was only after he took that step that he realized that someone had done an incredible job of making this ledge look exactly like the cliff wall. So, to have faith requires doubt. To doubt means to question. To doubt means to wrestle and to live into that. But ultimately, it is that covenant that unites us together. We're staring down some difficult things in the world around us, where people of many faith traditions are, in my opinion, being faithless to their tradition. What's going on in Pakistan and Afghanistan is faithlessness to Islam. The challenge we face is, what do we have the ability to affect? I don't have a lot of control over what people are doing in Afghanistan, but I can donate a little bit of money towards the refugee campaign that the city is putting forward. But if I just say, I'm going to pray for the Afghani people and do nothing, am I really actually offering them something? Yes, but is it the most practical use of my time? Can it be a both and? No, that's just an example of many that are out there. But more importantly, let's bring it down to where we are right here, right now. What does it mean to live out our faith as members of this congregation? We're going to be exploring what our lives in God are like as St. Anne's when we step into our stewardship campaign coming up soon. Now, this ain't going to be your grandma's stewardship campaign. We ain't just going to talk about time, talent, and treasure and have a couple things here and there. We're going to dive deeply into our stories together to bring your perfect gifts, as we talked about last week. It was only last week. Gosh, I feel like so much has happened since then. And see where our faith is compelling us to be faithful and act in this community and in the world around us. So beliefs are good. Beliefs are important. However, they cannot stand alone and bring about God's kingdom on earth. So may we this week, as we explore our lives, as we will continue to do in months to come, what are the ways of being? What are the actions? What are the commitments? What are the follow-throughs that we need to make sure that we are doing so that we actually live into God's kingdom? Are there areas in our lives where we claim belief in something or claim to want to do something but don't? Are there areas where we claim to and do? We should celebrate those as well. If all we focus on is what we don't do, we end up just depressing ourselves and miss the point of the fullness of all of it. So let us celebrate what we do well. Remember what we might need to work on. Temper judgment with mercy, but ultimately let's love our neighbor as ourselves. Because after all, our neighbor is the face of God. Amen.